Greetings VFI supporters and anyone else watching this video. It's been a very difficult week here in Israel as we all have to sit and wait to see when or how Iran will respond to the assassinations of two terrorist leaders last week. Everyone is bracing for the worst and preparing as best as they can, and that includes the US Navy, which is rushing ships into the region as fast as possible to deter and attack and defend Israel if one comes. Iran is also showing signs of reconsidering the severity of their actions in the face of intense diplomatic opposition. All that and much more is just ahead on this week's edition of VFI News. Let me start this report by telling you that we're recording this video on Thursday afternoon and the situation is very fluid, so by the time you watch the video it could be a whole different ballgame. But as of Thursday afternoon, this is what we've got in front of us. The US and Israeli intelligence agencies were warning last week that an Iranian-led attack against Israel was imminent. In fact, the US was warning that an attack could come as early as Monday. But Monday came and went without any attack, as did Tuesday and Wednesday. And here we are on Thursday afternoon and still no attack. Hezbollah leader Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah apparently decided to make a virtue out of necessity. He declared during a speech on Tuesday evening that keeping Israelis in suspense about when the attack against them would come was part of the punishment the Iranian-led Axis was giving Israel. The last week has been tough. And I'll even admit that there have been moments over the past week when I almost wish the next shoe would just drop already so we could get it over with and stop bracing for the worst. Many Israelis have rushed to the supermarkets to buy water, and even some of the supermarkets were out of water. But all of this to say, people have been trying to get ready for the worst case scenario. But then again, by now, it started to become obvious that the Iranians were caught totally unprepared for this moment and had no plan for what to do when it came. Talk is cheap, my friends, especially in the Middle East. The reason actions speak louder than words is because words are so common and actions are actually kind of rare. There's a couple of other things going on that I think have caused the Iranians to be slow in acting. This includes the assassination of Hamas political bureau chief Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran was an inside job. The explosives that killed him were placed under his bed in the house he was staying in while in Tehran for the inauguration of the new Iranian president by two officers in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. According to reports in various international media portals, these two men had been enticed by the Mossad to place the small explosive charge in the room, and as soon as they accomplished this task, they were whisked out of Iran by the Mossad. For all we know, they're now sipping margaritas on the beach in Cancun or maybe some other place far away from Iran. But in any case, these two men almost certainly didn't act alone. That's why dozens of people have been arrested by the IRGC, including some senior IRGC officers, on suspicion that they assisted in the assassination. It could take weeks before all the necessary interrogations and investigations are completed. Until they are, the Iranians can't be sure who among their own people they can trust. And it's hard to make plans if you can't be sure the people you're making those plans with aren't working for the other side. That's not even to mention the fact that Iran's ruling regime and the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps know very well that the Iranian people despise them and would like nothing better than to get rid of them. There have been demonstrations in Iran against the regime by a wide variety of factions almost every week for several years now. Sometimes those demonstrations get really big and they draw the attention of the international media. The rest of the time, they don't get big enough for anyone outside Iran to pay much attention. But they haven't stopped, and the regime knows how fragile its own position inside the country is. Furthermore, the U.S. deployment of naval vessels equipped with combat-proven Aegis air defense system, additional squadrons of combat aircraft, has certainly made any potential Iranian strike more complicated. Military assets from France and the UK have also been moved into position to defend against a potential Iranian-led strike, just as they participated in the Allied defense of Israel back in April. The US, British, and French ships have the ability to track and shoot down ballistic missiles fired at Israel from Iran, as well as what the Houthis in Yemen might try to throw Israel's way. They'll be less effective against incoming rockets and UAVs coming from Hezbollah in Lebanon, since the distance these incoming projectiles are coming from are so short. That, I think, is the biggest problem Israel faces, the rockets and missiles coming from Hezbollah, and I'll talk about that more in a second. Aside from their fear of Israeli retaliation to their planned attacks, the Iranians also have to take into consideration the enormous failure of their attack in April and the huge diplomatic backlash it prompted. Dozens of countries around the world condemned them for firing missiles at Israel, including most of the neighboring countries here in the Middle East. Many of the countries that condemned Iran for their attack in April are now joining the chorus on warning them not to do something like that again. That includes Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt, all of whom have told Iran that it is not an option for their airspace to be used to launch missiles at Israel. That means that if the Houthis want to fire missiles at Israel, they'll have to use a very narrow corridor running right down the middle of the Red Sea. If the missiles go a few kilometers off course to the left or the right, they'll be shot down by Egyptians or Saudi air defense. The same goes for missiles fired at Israel from Iranian territory that try to fly over Saudi Arabia or Jordan. Last, but certainly not least, even the Kremlin has asked Iran to be restrained in its actions and in particular to avoid targeting civilians. This is according to a report by Reuters, which quoted two unnamed sources in the Iranian regime as saying that Vladimir Putin's personal envoy, Sergei Shoigu, conveyed this message to the Iranian leadership during a visit to Tehran on Monday. There are a few different possible reasons for this, including the obvious fact that there are over 1 million dual Russian-Israeli citizens living in this country. Also, there's the fact that the Kremlin wants and needs Iran to continue to be their strategic ally, and that would be difficult if they get blown to smithereens by the Israeli Air Force and or the US Navy. An incinerated ally is no ally at all for the Kremlin, and so they might be trying out of enlightened self-interest to convince Tehran to avoid making a suicidal mistake. On that note, late on Wednesday evening, reports emerged that even Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has urged Ayatollah Khomeini to refrain from attacking because Iran's economy is too fragile to survive the counterattack. All of these factors are, in my humble opinion, making it unlikely that an attack on Israel will come directly from Iran, and any attack coming at Israel from the Houthis in Yemen will be manageable. That leaves the ever-increasing likelihood of a large-scale attack from Hezbollah in Lebanon. Israel is taking the possibility of such a strike very seriously, and here at Vision for Israel, we are too. That's why we've been racing to place bomb safety shelters in communities at high risk from rocket attacks as fast as possible over the past several years, and even more so since the beginning of the war. Regular viewers of this program will already know that one such shelter we placed in the Druze village of Majd al-Shams on July 22nd saved several lives when the rocket fired by Hezbollah hit the soccer field in that village just a few days later. Our campaign to place bomb safety shelters is complemented by our campaign to provide ambulances and medical cycles as well as training and supplies to medical first responders and stockpiling food and household items at our Millennium Center in Modi'in. We have many other projects meant to support and sustain the population of this country in times of crisis and also in times of routine. If you would like to know more about that, please visit our website, visionforisrael.com, and click on the Project tab. There you'll see how you can help us be a blessing to the land and people of Israel, including Jews, Arabs, Druze, refugees, and anyone else who needs us. Once again, that website is visionforisrael.com, and click on the Project tab. Also, please like this video and subscribe to our channel, and please comment below if you want to support the work that we're doing. Now, getting back into the latest news, as I said before, the threat of a large barrage of rockets, UAVs, and missiles being fired into Israel by the Iranian-backed Hezbollah terrorist organization in Lebanon is the most immediate threat Israel faces. There has been a steady stream of weapons being fired into Israel ever since October 8, 2023, and in recent days the volume of fire has sharply increased. In an effort to deter Hezbollah from taking further escalatory steps, the Israeli Air Force sent planes to create sonic booms over Beirut on Tuesday afternoon, just moments before Nasrallah was scheduled to begin his speech. During the speech, Nasrallah pointedly dismissed the sonic boom warnings as petty and unimportant. He also said that the IDF of 2024 is not comparable to the IDF of 1973 and 1967, which defeated the combined armies of several surrounding Arab countries. He said that the current generation had to rely on outsiders to fight their battles for them, and it would not be able to stand up to the war machine Iran was assembling to confront it. As if to make that point, throughout the week, a steady stream of weapons have been fired into northern Israel, setting off alarms in northern communities, causing fires and occasionally killing or wounding a few people. The IDF has struck back, destroying several Hezbollah weapons storage facilities, firing positions, warehouses and training centers, as well as hitting field commanders and other high-ranking officials. Preparations are nonetheless being made on Israel's home front, with disaster response teams being sent to major cities including Tel Aviv. Magen David Adom, Israel's emergency medical response organization, is reported to have stockpiled large quantities of supplies and engaged in intensive training programs for professionals and civilian volunteers alike. The police, firefighters, and other civilian emergency response teams are all on high alert, preparing to assist the population. Another related story in the scramble by Israelis who were traveling abroad when tensions rose to get back home, several major airlines almost immediately began canceling flights in light of the security situation. This prompted El Al, Arkia Israel Airlines, and El Al's subsidiary Sundor to add flights from nearby Athens, Greece, and Larnaca, Cyprus to Israel. This will allow some of the estimated 150,000 Israelis who were outside the country when flights began to be canceled last week to get home. Meanwhile, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant visited the Tel Nof Air Base on Tuesday, telling the assembled soldiers and airmen, "Every day that passes, we are improving our defense readiness and sharpening our attack capabilities. I look at the foundation by which we operate: courage, determination, and perseverance. Take advantage of the time, planning, training, discussions, especially about the least expected, because usually the least expected happens." On that note, something I certainly wasn't expecting also happened on Monday. I'm talking about an Iranian-backed militia in Iraq launching an attack on a U.S. counterterrorism base located in northern Iraq. 7 U.S. personnel were wounded in the attack, which was one of the most intense made against U.S. troops deployed in the region in recent months. If Iran is looking to avoid a major confrontation, why on earth is it giving its proxies the green light to attack U.S. troops now? It's hard to figure these guys out sometimes. There's one other major story to talk about this week, and that's the decision to replace Ismail Haniyeh as the leader of the Hamas political bureau with Yahya Sinwar, who is already the head honcho for Hamas in Gaza. IDF Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi was quick to respond to this decision by saying it changes nothing, that Sinwar was already a major target of the IDF operations in the Gaza Strip, and he still is, the new title he's been given notwithstanding. It's worth mentioning some history here, as Sinwar became the head of the Hamas military wing in 2017 and assumed the role of leader of Hamas in Gaza when Haniyeh was smuggled out of the Strip a few years later to assume the role of political leader. This gave him the possibility to leave the austere conditions in Gaza and move to new quarters in a luxury Doha hotel, among other things. But Sinwar, despite being isolated in the network of tunnels underneath the Gaza Strip, has strong ties to the Iranian regime. His appointment by the Hamas Shura Council would appear to indicate a determination to deepen ties with the regime in Tehran, which somewhat puts Hamas at odds with other Muslim Brotherhood franchises. It's also important to remember that Sinwar is not just the leader of a terrorist organization. He's also a religious fanatic who believes sincerely that he's acting as the hand of his God on this earth. He believes that Hamas is destined to play a role in ushering the golden age of Islam by destroying Israel, which will pave the way for the Muslim prophecies about the end of days to be fulfilled. This is a subject that doesn't get covered enough in the media, and I don't know enough about it myself to talk about it right now. Be that as it may, the battle against Hamas in the Gaza Strip is showing signs of winding down, and on Wednesday evening, U.S. officials were saying that a deal to release the remaining Israeli hostages and begin a ceasefire was within sight. But they've said that before, so it's unclear what is fueling all this optimism in Washington. We're almost out of time for this week's report, friends, but I want to continue my tradition of ending with some good news, which we need more this week even than usual. The good news is provided to us by Israel's Olympic team, which has been very successful this time around. The 6 medals they've already earned, including a gold medal, 4 silvers, and a bronze, are the most of any Israeli Olympic delegation in history. But it's not just the medals, it's the fact that they've performed with dignity in the face of intense hostility. This team has needed to be accompanied by armed guards every minute they've been in Paris because of the threats against them. There were threats to disrupt the Olympics this year, and not only because of the Israeli athletes. It's just a really rough time here on planet Earth, and a lot of people are just in a bad mood. But in the midst of all that, Israel's Olympians have kept up their spirits and made us all proud. Until next week, friends, I'm Lirania L. Snyder, and this has been another edition of VFI News from Israel. Shalom.